I'll tell you what I'm hearing here is that your low performers can drive your A players out of your organization, leaving holes in your organizational chart. So I think I'm not too far afield to say that if you leave the low performers in your organization without accountability, you could end up with a bunch of A holes in your org chart. Hello and welcome to Your Business, Your Wealth. My name is Paul Adams. I am CEO of Sound Financial Group, founder, and honored and deeply touched, and not in a way that is all inappropriate. By Corey Shepard just being here today.
Look in your eyes, like I'm going
to tell a secret.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell a secret about Corey today. If you guys ever talk to Corey, and if his hair is standing on end, perhaps like the heat miser for those of you that watch old Christmas shows, or like an angry cockatoo, that means Corey is having a rough day, could be on his last nerve, of which he has many. I have gotten on all of them. Corey, so glad you could be with us today. I had to wind up for that one. I had to go hard. This time is
moral of the story is we gotta let you do the intro a little bit more often, because you just like store up more energy when you Yeah,
I think I had 3 that time. Just worked them into one.
Well, I think we got someone else hanging out here with us today. You wanna say anything more about that?
Indeed, I do. We've got with us today Michael Langhout, who has another podcast called CEO Brainfood. Has been a longtime friend of the show, first time being on as a guest. Here's what I think is most important for y'all to know about Michael. If you've never had a chance to work with a business coach, or if you have and you've been left a little bit lacking, this is the kind of guy that if you're a fit for him and his practice, this is the guy that you want to talk to. He has over 30 years of business experience, both as a high-level executive and out there as an entrepreneur, but not in the same types of companies. He has worked in technology, healthcare, actual manufacturing. So depending on the type of business somebody has, he has this enormous base from which he can speak to their businesses. And he shares that and so much more on his podcast, CEO Brainfood. Michael Langhout, welcome. So glad you could join us today.
Hey, thanks, Paul, and so glad to be here. You're kind with your words. Corey, good to see you as well.
You too, Michael. And Paul's just being truthful. And, I want to add, it's been great to know you over several years now, and you've done some amazing work with us in various sizes and iterations of our firm over the years, and always been helpful. So I'm kind of surprised that we haven't had him on till now, Paul. Like, I don't know what our problem was, but glad you're here now.
We're waiting for him to get the awesome headset he has now.
Yes.
Just waiting for that. Well, here's kind of one of the first things that I want to talk about, Michael. And if people are listening who have worked with you in the past, there's something that they may not know that really comes out on CEO Brainfood, and that is how incredibly well-read you are. You've worked with us on and off for years, and literally you are such an amazing listener and so amazing at bringing one little soundbite of knowledge to a conversation that just needs a little help, that I had no idea how well read you were and how well versed you are on all these multidisciplinary topics until you're in the podcast environment having to talk for 15, 20 minutes at a shot. Maybe could you just share with our audience to kick us off what your history has been career-wise and what led you to start being such a, not just a voracious reader, but somebody that really studies a lot of this business stuff in a way that you can deploy it into other companies?
Well, I guess, Paul, age has something to do with it. Frankly, I've, been a CEO of different companies, serial entrepreneur, started up a few and had some good exits. And at some point in time, you want to give back. And so a few years ago, actually about 6 or 7 years ago, I shifted into growth coaching, because I want to help the CEOs that I'm working with, their leadership teams in these mid-market companies. Typically, I'm working with companies that are 25 employees to maybe 250 employees, something like that. That's what I would define as lower mid-market for me. And I see struggling, and I've been there, done that myself. A few battle scars to show for it, and I just love to share what I know after 40 years of working. Retirement for me isn't anything that I aspire to. I love this.
Well, most of our clients neither, and that's a whole other topic. But glad you bring it up. Yeah.
Retirement has a bunch of different, different meanings, and I guess it looks different for different people. For me, if you find your spiritual gifts, the gifts that God has given us, that we do and leverage those, and you find a need in the world, kind of where those two lines cross is a perfect job. And I feel like that's where I'm at. I think that's where you guys are at. You're awesome at what you do. But back to your question, yeah, I mean, I always have been interested in learning. Learning for me is a lifetime endeavor. I remember even, going back to high school, just I had some inspiring teachers that would challenge me, and we'd have terrific conversations and great books that we'd talk about, and then through university and so on, and then out into the world. And I suppose there was probably a gap for a while. My early career, I didn't read so much, but lifetime learning for me is a very, very big deal and an important thing. And I don't know how many books. I lose count of how many books I've read.
I'm willing to bet you've read every single one in those stacks behind you.
Well,
that's not just for show.
I'd like to say, gee, Corey, that's absolutely true, and it's absolutely not true. My wife says, honey, you got another box from Amazon. What are you doing?
Michael actually doesn't know that they also sell other things now. He's still exclusively ordering his books there.
It's a bookstore. I don't do anything. Anyway, so most of them are, I buy them because of their titles and their authors. I will say all of the books behind me I have looked at. Most I've read. Those that I haven't read in completion are probably just not interested. I get 50 or 100 pages into a book, and if it grips me, then I go on. If not, I put it down. But lifetime learning.
I was going to say, let me ask you something that you mentioned a little bit earlier about the hardships so you go into a company, you're helping coach them for more growth, or you're having an exploratory conversation with them about whether or not it would be a good fit. What is the biggest challenge or challenges that you see CEOs and entrepreneurs have before you get in communication with them? And what do you think they're currently doing to solve it? And what could they be doing differently? That's like a 3-part question.
Well, it's a great question, and that's right on the horns of the dilemma, right? I mean, when a client or a potential client presents or is interested, obviously they're searching for something. They're searching for a coach. Typically, there's a problem, and they either don't know what it is, they're stuck, and they don't know how to get unstuck, or they know what it is, they suspect what it is, and they're looking for help to solve that problem. But most of the time, the problems that they're facing are symptoms of a bigger problem. And so I'm listening very, very carefully to the words. Words carry a great deal of importance, the words that we use. And so I'm listening very carefully to how they're phrased and sort of their anguish, driving for discovery on the pain points. I really want to find where those pain points are. And what are the triggers, to use a word that Marshall Goldsmith wrote a great book about called Triggers by the same name. What are the triggers? What are some of the underlying causes? And you have to use the Japanese technique, ask why 5 times. Paul, I think you even had
a Japanese technique?
I thought that was just a technique when you don't speak the language well, because I use that one. When I don't speak somebody else's language great, I just keep going, why? Why? And then in other languages, I just learned that word.
Yeah.
Como?
Como. So I was listening recently to another one of your great podcasts, Leadership Impact. For those that are listening,
Oh yes, the one with Carrie Granger that I co-host. Yes,
Carrie Granger, and using the words why versus what, and it was because the why it puts a person into a defensive position. The what is exploratory. It's something that we can do. You and what are words that are I'm sorry, you and I are words that put a person on the defensive. So why are you doing that? It bothers me. That and frankly, that's how a lot of employees get talked to by their superiors.
Yeah.
What was it about this situation that that we could explore together to understand where it was broken and what happened here?
Do you notice a theme of certain things that are the biggest pain points for most entrepreneurs when you first talk to them?
Yes, it's usually standing in the way of great financial results. They're not getting good results, and so they're pointing towards execution. They think that they could use some help in that area, and so that's usually how they come. Is we've got a problem with our execution. Our processes are not working well, and so we need some help with that. And I will enter into the relationship wherever they feel like they'd like to have me enter. In other words, I'll walk with them. I'll meet them where they are. But I can tell you that in I don't know the percentage, but extremely high percentage of time, probably north of 80% of the time, we go back to people. It's some kind of a cultural or people issue that's causing the problem, and so we go through some tools and techniques to identify where those are, and we can get there pretty quickly. We don't need days and half days, and we can do it in an hour or two, knock it out, and we find out exactly where the problem is.
Wow.
And so people think it's financial.
Yeah.
But it'll be like it's the people they've hired or the way they're managing them or who they have in what seat.
Oh, it totally gets back to culture, which to me is the core values, the purpose, the BHAG, which is the great Collins term that he coined back in 95 when he wrote Built to Last. Fabulous book. Parts of it don't really apply today because in 95, the internet was not what it is today. So when he talks about a BHAG of a 10 to 25 year goal, I have some clients that just absolutely start panicking. It's like they can't think beyond next week. So we bring it into a more of a 3HAG, like a 3-year highly achievable goal. So we do that in our strategy work. But back to the point, yeah, it's people. And so we do talent assessments. I love top grading. Top grading is a tool that we use, great methodology developed by Dr. Brad Smart out of Chicago. He's got a great 650-page book that you probably wouldn't want to read when you're going to bed. His son,
or maybe you would.
Good point. His son, Jeff Smart, also a PhD, and has been in the business for a while, many years. In fact, wrote a primer, or in my view, a much better book, much more easy to digest, called Who. And boy,
I've been listening to Michael's podcast.
Do I ever recommend that book for any CEO? I mean, my gosh, I mean, it describes, how do you recruit, interview, particularly in the interviewing. There's a two-step interviewing process, screening and a top grading tandem interview. But there's a recruiting, there's an interviewing, there's a hiring, an onboarding, a training. I mean, all of those things are separate categories that need to be managed so well. And so often they're not. I mean, we find somebody, they're warm and vertical, they can fog a mirror, and we bring them in and, we give them
warm and vertical.
We give them a cubicle and we give them a laptop and we're printing up business cards and maybe they'll get here in 3 weeks. And, we're not prepared. We give a party for somebody when they're leaving. We should be giving a party for them when they come. And assign them a buddy, help them navigate through. These people come in, they don't have a clue about the company. They've not been told anything about the purpose. They know what the product or service is, but they don't know anything about the culture. I mean, you guys both have families, you have wives, and I know Paul, I don't know, Corey, in your case, if you have children, but Paul, I know you do. And so there's a culture in the Adams family, right? There's a culture in the Langhout family. There's a culture, Corey, in the Shepherd family. And so if you bring somebody into that new family, wouldn't you want them to know about you guys? Wouldn't you want them to know? And so often, I mean, it's incredulous to me that the CEO delegates this out to an HR person, and there are many that are very, very good, but honestly, there's a whole bunch that aren't. And so it's just, these are the areas that I think, that we really, if we can fix those kinds of problems, these are foundational, right? I mean, I look at a business. There's 6 systems in a business that I think about, but the basic system is your CEO and that leader that has to be constantly communicating the core values, the purpose, so that
Michael,
everybody hears that all the time.
You're giving me such an aha right now, mentioning people first and then systems. And what comes to mind is, of course, it's people, because really good people can actually get a lot done, even in not so great systems and structures. They can press through that. And really not good people and not good fit can tear down the best systems and structures that have ever been built. So you're not going to do it without good people, and you're not going to do it with bad people, no matter what.
Yeah, and then you go to the execution piece, which is where they typically are coming in anyway, and they're saying, all right, well, let's take a look at the processes. And typically you're going to find a book somewhere, or it's on a shared file, a shared drive somewhere. You're going to find this list of processes that some consultant came in and helped them develop 5 years ago. And today, none of them are being followed because everyone came in and did not get trained, and so they do workarounds, right? There's stuff that has to get done. There's a process for it, but we don't know what that process is because it's buried somewhere. Nobody's looked at it in years. So we invent our own. I mean, it's no wonder stuff is broken. It's just it's appalling to me that this stuff happens, and that the point I wanted to come back to, Corey, on your observation about people, and this is something people don't really understand, CEOs particularly. If you think about those thoroughbreds, those A performers, right? I mean, they're just the high figured out factor. I mean, the coaching for them is way different than the coaching for anybody else. Your job is to just remove the obstacles and give them the free running lane in front of them so that they can just blast and go. Right. And so you want a high percentage. Most companies have about 25% of their employees are in that category. And you want that up around 70, 80% if you can get it. And the point that I'll make, and then I'll leave this topic, is that the ones that are not performing that you described, that'll kill the company, kill the culture, kill the processes, call those C performers, just in the top grading vernacular. There is a risk of flight on the A guys, because the A guys see the lower performers and they're having to pick up the slack, right? Oh, somebody called in sick, or they were late for a meeting, or they missed the meeting. Or I had a coaching session yesterday with the CEO. She was all distraught about this person that continues to forget about meetings. And Paul, I know that would scratch an itch of yours.
Well, I was going to say for me, I'll tell you what I'm hearing here is that your low performers can drive your A players out of your organization, leaving holes in your organizational chart. So I think I'm not too far afield to say that if you leave the low performers in your organization without accountability, you could end up with a bunch of A holes in your org chart.
And with that, I think with the mention of A holes, that's a perfect time to
in your org chart
commercial break. Yeah, in your org chart. So we'll take a break and hear a brief message from Sound Financial Group and be right back.
Hey everybody, I had to interrupt our show for just a moment to share with you something new. We've designed a new white paper that we think is going to add you value in the way that you think about money. It's 3 of the biggest mistakes we see people make and 6 ways to fix them. Now, for some of you, you might not want the white paper. You might be ready to have a conversation with us, and that is okay. You can email us at info@sfgwa.com. That's info@sfgwa.com. Find us on the web at yourbusinessyourwealth.com. And anytime on any of our social media platforms, send us a message and we can get you this white paper. But in the meanwhile, if you want to just skip over the white paper, have a philosophy conversation with us, we're happy to do that with you. Just let us know philosophy conversation in the subject line. And if you want this white paper, just put white paper in there and we'll immediately get out to you this white paper on the 3 biggest mistakes that we see people make and the 6 things that you can do to fix them. And now, back to our show.
Hello and welcome back to Your Business, Your Wealth with our special guest, Michael Langhout. Michael, I've been wondering since the beginning of our conversation in our talk about books, you've mentioned a couple, and including why that you recommend to CEOs, but are there any that you give away pretty regularly? Any books like over the course of your career that have become kind of your go-tos for someone to, you want them to read so much that you're just going to give them a copy whether they want to buy it?
Right. The boxes of multiple books that I have in other words, I buy a box of 20 of one book that I'm handing out like business cards. I have several of those. And frankly, a couple of them are fairly recent.
Great.
One has just been released. It's a kind of sequel called Get in the Game by Rich Armstrong and Steve Baker. And that's all about the great game of business, which is a whole framework and methodology out of Springfield, Missouri, a great company there called Springfield Remanufacturing, and Jack Stack, who wrote the original book, The Great Game of Business. So that's one. And just a quick little story on that. In that company, just to add emphasis, 10 cents invested in that company in 1983 today is worth $7,000. 10 cents today is worth $7,000. That beats Buffett by a lot in terms of growth. These guys have really got it. They've created a lot of wealth, a lot of millionaires, including some of the janitors in the place. They're an ESOP, an employee stock ownership program, where they have their employees own a part of the company, and it's a terrific story. Jack Stack is just in the process of releasing a new book. It'll be released in January, and so we're looking forward to that. But this is a good book. Get in the game. And so I also like The Three Hag Way, which is Shannon Susko. That book came out a couple of years ago, I think maybe a year and a half ago. Strategy execution system out there. Shannon is a 3-time serial entrepreneur, 3 successful exits, and the book is about her creating those companies and creating massive amount of wealth in the process for her employees and also for herself and her investors. Shannon's a colleague of mine. She's a coach and a wonderful speaker, author, great person. The other is Exponential Organizations by Salim Ismail. And Exponential Organizations is all about the whole concept of disruption and growing exponentially as opposed to linearly. We're oftentimes we think about linear growth. Where do we want to be in 3 years? Well, if I'm doing 20 million this year, then 3 years from now I want to be doing 30 million or 40 million. So it's just a linear sort of growth. Salim has described a process to help us think through with 10 attributes of exponential growth, how to change that curve into a rapidly rising exponential growth curve.
Well, and if I could, this might be a good time for a little gear change in our conversation to go on to disruption. You talked about exponential, and nearly any conversation, any conference you go to, they're going to talk about disruption. What they talk about is how humans have such a difficult time actually understanding exponential growth, like the doubling of a penny every day for 30 days does not seem like it will end up at 8 figures, but it does. So can you just talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the way people maybe are not paying enough attention to disruption? And we'll kind of dig into that topic, and then I think that'll be it for this episode, because I think that's going to be a bunch of meat on that bone.
Yeah, you're right on that, Paul, and it's probably worthy of of a series of podcasts. In fact, I'm thinking about just doing just that with my podcast, CEO Brainfood. But yeah, back to the concept of linear versus exponential. So we're thinking about Uber, Airbnb, these kinds of companies that are out there, and you don't have to be like that. You don't. But there are concepts and attributes that they utilized, um, and maybe they didn't even realize they were utilizing them. It wasn't organized. It was just how it was done. I mean, the guys that started Airbnb were looking for a place to stay. They couldn't find one, so they crashed at a friend's house and put up a bunch of air mattresses. Today, they're the largest hotel chain in the world. What, 5 years, 10 years? I mean, I don't know. Airbnb wasn't around 10 years ago, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
And the largest in the world, and they have no hotels. They have no assets. So it's a leveraging of assets. It's staff on demand. How do you scale your company without any people? Think Uber. Uber doesn't have anybody working for them, well, other than staff. Obviously, there's a headquarters staff, but for administrative and probably DevOps and so on. But their basic service, which is disrupting the taxi industry, those people work for themselves. Staff on demand, algorithms. How do you take a process and make it better? How do you speed things up? I mean, back to the Japanese. 30 years ago when I was in Japan studying this, looking at process control. It was how do you get things maybe closer together to reduce the transportation in a manufacturing operation. Today, it's all technology. It's how do you leverage and grow exponentially using algorithms, and these are being used now by any company. Small companies, I mean, easily can bring in algorithms. IoT, the Internet of Things, sensors are everywhere. I mean, I can't believe it. Every time I turn around in my car, I've got some noise going off that there must be 30 or 40 sensors, or probably way more than that. And think Tesla. In an automobile, there's something like, I don't know, 25,000 parts in an automobile produced in any manufacturing, Detroit or in Japan or in Germany, Stuttgart, all of the the German automotive. There's 25,000 parts, and Elon Musk in his brilliance has come up with an automobile which is really an app on wheels, and it's got 17 parts.
Mm.
And it took somebody from, I mean, his interest was in developing a battery. He didn't really want to make cars. He still wants to make batteries.
I'll be darned. Yes. Well, and
he feels that's the long play. I mean, it's not the automotive; it's the battery itself. So we see ourselves coming off the grid at some point and having our own battery in our own home. And those are some of the things that experimentation, community and crowd, interfaces. Think Apple App Store. That's an interface. Dashboards. Look at your own business. You should be dashboarding every key metric that you are that you look at to think about as a CEO in your business or as an operations person. There should be dashboards. I walk around these factories and these offices, and they're blank walls. I mean, those are billboards just waiting to be lit up with all sorts of data. We need to be looking at data more. So anyway,
we even have a client that will take a little computer, or like what do they call them, the Raspberry Pis,
Pi.
And they will create mobile displays of business systems where all you have to do is send the Raspberry Pi to somebody at a different location with a monitor that they can go to Costco if they're working out of their home or something. Go to Costco, buy a monitor, put it on their wall, plug this Raspberry into it, all pre-programmed, and it'll just get the company's dashboards on that computer screen for that lone remote employee. It's incredible. And I got to say something on the data front. Jordan, do you mind me telling one on you? Okay. So Jordan, if you guys can't hear him, he's our video engineer in the background. Right before we began to record this episode, he was sharing with me that he requested all the information Google had on him. Now, he's not even 30 yet. 12.5 gig file.
Whoa.
And one was just location after location he was in, and Google's interpretation of was he walking, running, or in a car at the time. Like they have a So when you talk about the amount of data somebody can have on your customers, or the things that they can use to either feed algorithms or things they can use to produce dashboarding, that at a minimum, getting some of those core systems in place in your business can make all the difference in the world, whether it's your people systems, dashboarding systems, growth systems, all make a tremendous difference. I'd encourage everybody listening to get over, download an episode of CEO Brainfood. You'll get a sense of these different topics. You can scroll through. Michael does a great job of categorizing them. Also, he has his consultancy, Langhout International. Incredible guy to sit down and have a session with, whether you're local here to the Seattle area or somewhere across the country. He also works by Zoom meeting, and you can take a chance and enjoy a conversation with Michael, and he'll let you know up front if you're a fit or not a fit. He's very picky about who he contracts with in a good way, but he's also really great at sending people off in a new direction with some new tools and resources they may not have had before. So, Michael, I'm so glad you could be with us today.
Paul, it's an honor, and I just really, really appreciated the time talking with you guys, and always do. So, looking forward to also hosting you, Paul, and Corey on my podcast, CEO Brainfood. So, thank you so much today.
Yep, we look forward to it. And everybody listening, again, encourage you, go check out CEO Brainfood. Don't forget to leave us a rating and a review. If you send us that, take a screenshot of it, email it into info@sfgwa.com. We will send you a free gift of sound financial advice or Cape Not Required. Or if we catch Miranda in the right mood, she'll send you both books. It just depends. And do not forget, Michael has a great giveaway for all of you listening today. That giveaway is his Team Functions worksheet. Am I saying it right?
That's right.
Team Functions worksheet. You can get that at ceobrainfood.com, or just email us info@sfgwa.com, and we'll get it over to you, and we'll also have a link right in the description. We hope that this, as always, has been a contribution to you being able to design and build a good life. Hey guys, so glad you could tune in and watch that video. I want to remind you to subscribe. Be sure to hit the notification bell so you can get the latest piece of financial knowledge we release. And don't forget, go to Amazon, get a copy of Sound Financial Advice. Why? Because it'll make you better looking and smarter.